I remind you that the standard Teams protocols apply, and we move now to item 1 on the business, which is apologies for absence. And I believe there are none since we're all here, but apologies from me regarding the change of date. Are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair, I have received a declaration of interest from Councillor Hadley in relation to item 4. It's the financial interest as a council house tenant, but in terms of the associated dispensation, she will remain and participate in the discussion.
Thanks, Mel. Any further declarations, members? No. Members, with your permission, I'd like to take item 5 first. That's if Richard Porty is here. So Richard has other business today, and it's based on the fact that basically we changed the date. So Richard, we'll move to item 5 and over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members, Ward Manager. And thank you for taking me first on the agenda. That's much appreciated. So this report is Highland Council Roads, Area Roads, Winter Maintenance Report for Badenoch and Strathspey. So it basically is outlining the arrangements for this coming winter for the season 2021-22. There's no major, well, really no changes to report from arrangements last year. So it's business as usual as we approach winter. No change to the policy, no change to the budget, and no change to resources. There's note in the report mentioning something which is different, and that is obviously the COVID-19 scenario, which we experienced last year, and then to some extent there'll be a possible effect again this year. It just adds, like any other service, a level of concern. If we lost drivers, gritter drivers to COVID-19, it would put pressure on the system. But thankfully we're coming through that now, and you know, rules about self-isolating are relaxing as well now. So we're in a better position than we were last year. So that's all, and it's an improving situation. So that's all good. Drivers generally, sorry, we do have a vacancy still in Badenoch and Strathspey, but we're managing that. And despite the sort of national situation with drivers, we're confident that that's not going to be a problem for us. So, and vehicle-wise, the fleet is still in relatively good shape in Badenoch and Strathspey, relatively young fleet, and there were a lot of pressures last year due to turnaround time for vehicle breakdowns, and we're in discussion with fleet as a service about that, and keen to see improvement over last year, and we're hopeful again that we'll get that. So that's a summary from me. Does anybody have any questions on winter? I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, any questions? Muriel.
Richard, thank you as ever for the comprehensive report. Just a couple of things. You mentioned that, you know, our fleet is in good condition. However, we know that nationally there are delays in getting spare parts and shortages of parts. How are we for parts and also for materials? Are we pre-planning just or pre-stocking? There's certain things you can't stock, but some of the basic things, have we got a contingency in place for that?
Thanks very much. In the latest discussions with fleet, they're trying to keep on top of that as best they can, and it is something that they've been building in over the pandemic as best they can. But it's not fail safe, and there have been situations where there've been delays, and it's pretty. That's to some extent some of those are out of their control. But thank you for highlighting that. That's something we are very aware of.
Nothing further, members? Members, can you agree the recommendation, which is to approve the winter maintenance plan for Badenoch and Strathspey, which is in Appendix A? Muro, you went back in again? You're on mute again.
I was looking at my hand. I will email Richard directly. It's okay, thank you.
Well, if it's something that you want everyone to know about, you could.
Well, it's not necessarily in relation to the winter, but I'm just wondering, you know, because of the challenges you and your team have had, what summer works have not been completed, especially things like drain inspections, because we know there have been torrential downpours and we've all been contacted on Sundays and things like that about it. So I just wonder, will you be able to maintain that sort of work? We know we tend to move from summer to winter type things and things don't get done, but with the vagaries of our climate at the minute, are we going to be able to juggle, or are you going to be able to juggle both things? And thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, it's always a juggling act between cyclical work and winter maintenance, and if we get a mild winter, it's an opportunity to do more cyclical maintenance. If we get a hard winter, then other activities are on hold while we're dealing with winter. But obviously, storms are a fact of life during the winter. And you know, we've had some summer storms at the moment with thunderstorms and downpours, and as we go into the autumn, you know, it's to be expected as well. And yeah, so we're continuing to deal with these from a cyclical maintenance point of view, and then there's other legacy issues throughout our area as well as the rest of the Highlands in terms of, you know, the drainage infrastructure in many of our Highland towns and villages, and some of the issues we can address. Some are more costly and require more significant funds, and so are much more difficult to address, and that's been the case over over the years, you know. So it's a question of prioritizing and trying to make some improvement. And in Granton and Spey, I know there's various issues, and also in various other villages as well. So it is a bit of a juggling act from a seasonal point of view, also it's a huge juggling act from a financial point of view, and it's very difficult to get improvement in a lot of these legacy issues, where the drainage, the capacity of the drains just isn't you know, is limited, and so it copes for, you know, 90% of the time, but when there's a flash flood, you know, ponding can build up. And in some cases where there's low-lying property, that can be an issue for people. And often in these situations, there's an onus on the property holder to protect themselves as well. And in some cases, people are diligent about that, and in other cases, they seem to think that it's something that the local authority has to solve for them, but when really they should be doing more in their own property.
John.
Thank you. Richard, you've almost answered the question, but I was going to ask, are we up to date with all the gully clearances that should be taking place at this time of the year?
Yes, we're fairly well up to date. I should add as well that we'd hope to bring a roads programme update to committee in November, December, and that would be predominantly on capital spending, but I could also give a bit of an update on cyclical works as well.
Pippa.
just listening to you speak and recognising the variances in weather that we have had, and also not wanting to let you go without saying that this last year with our torrential rain, and then prior to that in the winter with unprecedented levels of snowfall that I don't remember seeing for some time on the higher roads, just how it was worth for me saying how well you've coped with all the variances of challenges that you've got, considering your staff have been impacted by COVID, especially through the winter, and that despite all indications that that we never knew what was coming next when we thought we did, you did an amazing job, and I for one just wanted to say that. I thought I'd end this on a positive one, because I know you have to rush off to another meeting, but I just wanted to say thank you. I'm a resident here, so you know, when I can get out and can't get out, I really do notice.
That's a very good point, because as we all realise that when we get up in the morning and head out, our drivers have been up hours ago trying to get the roads clear, and when they drive to work, the roads aren't clear. So they do a fantastic job, Richard, and Pippa makes a very good point. So members, can you agree item 2.1, which is the recommendation? I'll take that as a yes then. Richard, thanks very much, and apologies again for rescheduling on you.
No problem. Thanks all, and I'll pass on those thanks to the team. Thank you.
Members, we now move to item 3, which is the area fire and rescue performance report. And again, because of the change of date, we no longer have a verbal report, but we have a written report in front of you. And Liz, I don't know if any questions were lodged.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, as you say, due to the change of date, neither Ross Nixon nor Roddy Chapman could attend, and both sent their apologies and advised that they'd be very happy to pick up individual items with members. However, as agreed with the Chair, I asked members if they had any specific questions to bring forward as a result of the report, and 2 questions were received, one from the Chair and one from Councillor Coburn. So taking the 2 questions that relate to the report and in general in terms of Scottish Fire and Rescue provision in the area, I'll read the questions and the responses that were provided by Ross's team. So the first question from Councillor Coburn: is there an update on recruitment on firefighters for the Badenoch and Strathspey area? What is the current position? And are you finding that housing is proving an impediment to recruitment, or is your pool of firefighters generally coming from people who already live and work in the area? And the response from the fire and rescue team is as follows: we still have vacancies in all fire stations within the area. However, we currently have a number of applicants going through the recruitment process, and our recruitment engagement on both our Twitter and Facebook pages have been well received and widely shared. We have also had a number of new potential applicants come forward in the last few weeks, with 3 for the Aviemore area alone. We have 1 new firefighter in Granton and 3 in Carbridge. With regard to the housing question, our pool is coming from people who already live and work in the area. However, high housing prices mean that a high proportion of our young firefighters are finding it difficult to purchase a property, which has meant the potential for them to look out with the area in the future in order to get on the property ladder. The second question came from the Chair, Councillor Lobbin. And Councillor Lobbin asked for information on how Scottish Fire and Rescue staff have found dealing with Glenmore and Lochmorlich over the summer season. And the response is as follows: since the beginning of May, Aviemore and Kingussie units have attended Glenmore 6 times for reports of campfires, and Aviemore, Granton and Kingussie attended the large wildfire above Lochmorlich that was well reported in the press. This has been a massive reduction from the previous year, despite the number of visitors to the area remaining high. Crews from Aviemore, Granton and Kingussie fire stations have also attended Glenmore in partnership with Forest and Land Scotland and the Cairngorm National Park Authority Rangers to educate visitors on the no fire, no barbecues rules within the Glenmore Park area. This engagement has been well received by the public, and combined with the new signage at the Sled Dog Centre and the presence of Forestry and Land Scotland Rangers and Cairngorm National Park Rangers, seems to have heavily contributed to the reduction. Thank you.
That's good, Liz. Thank you very much for that. And really, this report is basically for comment and to scrutinise, which you have done. So we'll move on to the next section now. Next section is section 4, which is the Housing Performance Report. And I think we've got David Wood here today to present the report. David.
Right, thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Yeah, I'm pleased to present the Housing Performance Report for Q1, which covers the period April to June 2021. And if we look at the salient points, starting with emergency repairs. Emergency repairs, there's an improvement in the time taken to complete emergency repairs compared to previous quarters. Figure stands at 6.5 hours, which is well within the target time of 14 hours. We found as the COVID restrictions ease, tradesmen have got better access to properties and therefore they're able to respond to emergency repairs quicker. And I think this is reflecting in the performance figures. If we move on to non-emergency repairs, there's an increase in the time taken to complete non-emergency repairs, but this is due to the backlog that was created during the COVID crisis, and we continue to work our way through that. However, the figure of 7.2 days is within the target time of 8 days and within the Highland average of 16.2 days. Speaking with the maintenance team, they seem to indicate that it's going to take quite some time to actually clear the backlog that was created during the COVID crisis. If we move on to relets, relet times are over the 35-day target for this period, standing at 43.38 days. I think it's important to point out that during this quarter, 8 properties were relet, but overall we had 3 refusals. 2 of those were for sheltered housing, where the applicants decided they no longer wanted to enter sheltered housing. And the 3rd refusal was from a homeless applicant who was actually too ill to move at that particular time. That meant that those 3 properties needed to be reallocated, and that's what's reflecting on the performance figures. During the void period as well, we also found that 1 property required extensive repairs, and those repairs were actually completed during that void time. Again, reflecting on the performance figures. If we move on to rent arrears, there's quite a significant improvement on rent arrears in terms of previous quarters. We can attribute this to home visits, more frequent universal credit payments, and as tenants return to work after furlough, they are now making more consistent and regular payments, which all has helped to improve those figures. We also solved 1 high-level rent arrears case, and that's also contributed to those much improved figures. The capital programme, I think the Housing Investments Officers is going to provide a specific update at the ward business meeting, so there's not much for me to add there. And if we look at Appendix 1, finally, at the end of the report, we've 1 red and 1 amber warning. Both these issues clearly tie in with the problems we've had with the relet times. I think that about covers the main figures, so I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, David. It's really good to see the arrears being brought back under control. And it's actually really important that we get the maintenance back online, and there is a very substantial improvement over previous months. So I think that's very, very good. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair. David, thank you for the report, and I'd like to thank all the teams for their diligence in trying to manage everything sort of remotely, and the number of telephone calls they've been making to clients, and particularly when you see the hard work done with the positive communication for the rent arrears, and that's down to the teams. And I know they've been under a lot of pressure with things. Do we measure the demand? Because I know that you've got the amber there for the affordable renting, and I know personally a few cases that are coming up that their exit date is the end of September, and that puts these are family pressures on you. I'm really keen that we can support you and your teams in whatever way we can to be managing this stress, because I know how I feel, but I can't imagine how your staff are feeling on a daily basis, dealing with people that are facing eviction, and my heart and support goes out to you there. One thing that I am worried about, and it was a meeting I was at last week, and it was the first time that it has come up at this meeting, that we've got a shortage of healthcare workers this summer, in particular locum, between locum GPs, locum staff from all disciplines, and particularly healthcare support workers, because of the property prices, and whether that's rent, the lack of renting availability, or the actual cost. When you've got properties, particularly in one part of the world, going for 35% over the asking price, that is a deterrent. So what can we do as members to support you and get your voice heard as a team?
Thank you for that. I think the important thing is to just keep ensuring that the message is out there that we do struggle with the volume of properties we have. And on occasion, I think we've discussed before, we do struggle with the size of properties that become available. Your earlier point about, do we monitor it? Yes, we do. And when a new development is proposed, we try and have as much input as we possibly can to say what would be beneficial to us in terms of allocating properties, and in relation to the demand for those properties, particularly from a size perspective. It's not always possible to get what we want, because obviously for any development there's a footprint, and of course the developers try and fit in as many properties as is possible within that footprint, but we do feed the information through as best we possibly can. So yes, I think the important thing is to keep ensuring that message is in the public domain, that we do struggle with properties, but we are trying to accommodate as many people as we possibly can.
Councillor Hadley.
Hi, David. Thanks for your report. It was a question around the homeless presentations and the new provision of homeless accommodation not being held in a central bank but being dispersed throughout our housing stock. Is that working for the council? I understand it's dropped and it's probably eased a lot, but is it helping and not putting undue pressure on void properties for becoming homeless if there's presentations for them? And is it allowing properties to become available for homeless presentations in a time appropriate fashion? I just wondered if you'd had a little bit of an insight onto how the updated circumstances were working for you.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's working quite well in actual fact, but that's a lot of that can be attributed to the local team viewing the stock and ensuring we make best use of that stock, and extracting appropriate properties from the mainstream as and when we require homeless properties to be created. So we monitor that carefully, and we try and be subjective on that to ensure that we don't use everything we've got for homeless presentation, so no one ever moves on, and we don't move everyone on all the time, so people have got to wait for homeless accommodation. It's that juggling act, but overall it's working quite well. But quite honestly, I can thank my team for that, for managing it out very, very well.
Thank you.
I think one of the really big things that we could do to provide more housing for local people is if the Scottish Government rapidly progressed with the proposed legislation that they had prior to the election. Now it's out for consultation again. I would suggest that what we don't need is consultation. What we need is action. So that and immediately the Scottish Government make the announcements of the final legislation, that Highland Council adopt that legislation to its full extent, especially here in Badenoch and Strathspey, where we have a massive problem with the number of houses that are being converted from from permanent occupation into holiday accommodation. That's obviously not something that our housing service can do much about, but we as members should be making that point really clear. So, David, thank you very much for a very, very comprehensive report, and please pass our compliments to your staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll certainly pass those sentiments on.
Members, item 6 is the Badenoch and Strathspey ward placed funds, and I believe maybe the ward manager this will be tripping off her tongue. Liz?
Thank you, Chair. Members, firstly, the Head of Development and Regeneration would have been present today. Unfortunately, with the change of committee date, he's on leave and was unable to attend. So he would have been attending in support of the item. So if we have questions, I can relay them back to him on any of the specifics, but I will cover the report in the first instance. So members, you have before you a report seeking approval for allocation of funds from the Badenoch and Strathspey Place-Based Investment Fund. As members are aware, each ward has been awarded an additional 100k to enable a locally based and flexible response to the 4 harms of COVID. Members' local discussions have focused on 2 key priority areas for the ward. These are societal and economic impacts, and in particular on housing need and support for businesses. Other priority areas have also been discussed, and these are outlined at item 8 on this report, and as appropriate, these will be considered at future meetings of this committee. Members are being asked to agree to 3 funding proposals, 2 of which aim to support addressing the housing issues that affect the communities of Badenoch and Strathspey so crucially at this present time. And the 3rd initiative will begin work to support provision of opportunities for business development. In terms of housing, the 1st initiative is to commission a feasibility study to work with businesses to identify housing needs and requirements. There are many examples locally of difficulties that businesses are experiencing due to lack of availability of accommodation, and these are well documented. The 2nd piece of work will look at progressing a Housing for Businesses project to identify a site or sites to deliver a project based on demand identified working with local businesses. The piece of work related to supporting business development will involve commissioning of an independent audit of commercial units and to look at potential solutions arising from the outcomes of that audit. All of these initiatives will involve working with partners and agencies, and in particular the Cairngorm Business Partnership. And I'd be happy to take any questions from members.
Remember, these proposals have come from you yourselves. These are things that we discussed, and this is how basically you decided how this fund should be used. So happy to take any questions that you can pass and that Liz can pass on for you, if you so wish. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted that this has come to committee. I think its value hopefully will be a fruit sooner rather than later. The one thing that at the time when we were discussing this as a team, I would ask if it's not just businesses now that have been affected. We've heard today from our public sector partners, our NHS partners, we know of previous issues with the ambulance service. So if we can include our public sector personnel as their needs for housing as well, and the effects, because one service can't work without the other, and we need to do that, and we need to support our housing management team. Thank you.
That's actually a very good point, Muriel, because not every business is a member of the CBP. So it shouldn't just be about the CBP, but certainly all of our I suppose public service partners need to be considered in this, and it's really important because we have a very stark housing problem here. It's not getting any better, and it's going to get demonstrably worse. Councillor Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just surprised at the amount needed for these feasibility studies. 15,000 for housing needs and 20,000 for scoping for a housing for business project. It just seems an awful lot of money for a scoping document and a feasibility study. And I'm just wondering how these figures were devised.
Obviously, John, that's not something I would imagine that Liz can ask for you, but we'll get that response for you direct.
Thank you.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm incredibly pleased that during my tenure as a councillor, we've actually been put into a position where we can start to address this issue. I think 20 years ago, my father sold a staff house as he recognised there was a need for him to be able to house staff. And it was a 4-bedroomed converted property, and it has sat empty for 20 years as somebody's second home. Now, things have not got easier in that time. Once upon a time, well, at that time, you could buy another 4-bedroom property for £30,000. Those prices have all gone, and the capacity to be able to buy properties for people to be able to house their staff is gone. And this need has always been here, John. I hear what you're saying about the cost of the studies. However, the total cost that we've had to our population over the 20-odd years that I've been watching has been huge, with losing our young people, other young people unable to leave home. And although it's been well documented anecdotally, we've never been put into a position where we can put ourselves into action. And this is long overdue to be able to support the sort of changes that we need to be able to address this situation. And I'm delighted to have been able to put my name to being able to further this. And I'm very pleased to see this item come forward. Thank you.
Members, there are 4 recommendations. That's one more than is in your agenda. Can we agree the recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 7 is the community and asset transfer request from the Kingussie Market Stance.
Hello members, it's Ewan McIntosh here. Pleased to join you to present on the request from Kingussie Camanachd. Overall, this is a very strong request, members, and I'm pleased to bring it to you as a very strong example proposed for recommendation as the first which we're coming to your area committee. As noted in the report, following changes to governance of community asset transfer requests, typically those which are for a purchase of an asset at market value between 10 and 100,000 will come to local members at committee, or for a rental between 1 and 10,000 as a market value. If there's a request for a discount on that, it would come to yourselves rather than to strategic committee. In this instance, although the land has been valued at £1 for the lease, which we can explain in a moment, we're bringing it to you for attention and consideration, particularly because this is a common good asset, and that's noted on the next item on the agenda. So any consideration of this would be subject, of course, to the consultation required for common good, which my colleague Sarah, the common good officer, will attend to subsequently. Looking at the request in hand from the Shinty Club, it's very strong, and to give a background, the request is for a lease for 25 years at £1 per year, and it's to improve the condition of the pitch for continued use by the club, community use for sporting purposes. When we look at asset transfer requests, what we do is consider the discount that's requested against the market value, and we look at the evidence from the group. We're looking for particular things. It's the benefit to the community, the capacity of the group to deliver the project that they've proposed, support from the community for them to take that forward, and the resources necessary both to make that transfer happen and to sustain it in the future. And as members will see from the report, these are, broadly speaking, strong and very strongly in evidence from the club's request. With regards to community benefit, it's not simply to that community of interest in the sport itself, but also to the wider community. The club have been very clear in indicating they would continue to have it available for wider use. Links have been made with the school, and the head teacher is among one of many who have provided letters of support in favour of the request. So there would be a clear improvement to the sporting facilities which are available within Kinussie, and that's of benefit not just to shinty players but to young people in the area and others who've indicated they would strongly support improvements to the pitch as a local amenity that's widely available. As for the club's capacity to deliver, again, this is something which is very strongly in evidence in the request. They have prior experience of doing pitch improvements at the Dell, and amongst the membership of the club, it's definitely clear that there are those with some insight into pitch maintenance and groundworks and so on. It's believed that the pitch hasn't been very serviceable for about 10 years, so that in itself would be a significant improvement going forward if the requests were improved. As mentioned already, we've received a number of letters of support in favour of the request, and that includes from the high school, the Community Development Company, Community Council, local businesses and even neighbouring property owners, as well as this having support from other shinty clubs and the Camanachd Association, who very strongly endorsed this as a good example of a proposal for improvements, which could even see the area have improved capacity to host shinty events such as the Camanachd Cup final, which is the aspiration of the club to have those facilities locally. The club have proposed that from their sponsorship income that would support the ongoing maintenance of the pitch, so we regard the sustainability here as very strong also, and have identified some plausible sources of funding which include the postcode lottery and Sports Scotland. So that would be to support the costs of the new floodlighting and pitch improvements which are proposed for the site. So overall, the recommendation is that the request for a lease at 25 years for £1 be approved. As noted in the report, that's not technically a request for a discount, and the reason for that is with the condition of the pitch as it's presently in, and the lease here being restricted to community use, the market value is simply £1 there. And to explain that, the group couldn't profit from subletting that due to the restrictions that we would place on this being for community use. So valued at £1, and the recommendation for approval is of course conditional on the common good process which applies here. But I'd be pleased to take any questions from the members, and thank you for your time.
Members, we often see applications to take over council property, which, let's be honest, are a bit speculative. But this one, to be honest, is a fantastic application, and Kinussie Camanachd will easily be able to develop this. They have the resources and they have the skills available. So this is something really great. And me personally, I think we should approve this. Any questions, members? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. I totally agree with the chair on this. I also think that we need to commend the work of the team working with the Camanachd team and Kinussie Shinty Club, because between both parties there's been an excellent document and presentation of this, and there's an awful lot of hard work goes on in the background with this, and I think this is an exemplar thing for the local community and how to progress things going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Bruce.
I agree fully with supporting this project. I think it's going to be a very good thing for the town, and no hesitation in saying otherwise.
And Councillor Hadley.
I'd just like to echo what my colleagues have said, that it's a fantastic thing coming. I've witnessed the Camanachd Cup in action. I've got exclusive access to one of their lesser used pieces of ground that they will use when the Dell is flooded. But I've seen them swoop in at a moment's notice, clear all of the dog fouling, lay a huge pitch down with white chalk, move everybody in and play a game on conditions that are less than ideal. So it's absolutely great to see them get something they deserve for the young people. I'm fully supportive.
I think you're hearing from that, Ewing, that we support the process going forward, although the final decision is not exactly ours. Members, can you agree the recommendations in item 2.1?
Agreed.
Thanks, Ewan.
Thank you, members. Pleasure.
Item 8, members, is the Kingussie and Strathspey Common Good Funds, and Sarah Murdoch is here today. Sarah, over to you.
Morning, members. Yes, you have a report, quite a detailed and involved report before you this morning. It covers a number of points. There are 3 specific areas it covers, so I'll mention them separately. The one is the establishment of the Common Good Asset Register in respect of Kingussie, where we have already conducted the consultation process and received and drafted responses to any representations on any assets that were raised within that process. The second part of the report deals with the Granton consultation in respect of the list of property proposed to be included in a Common Good Register for Granton. That follows investigations into the various title deeds that we've been able to access and the information that we have to hand so far, and will then go out to public consultation for any additional information, suggestions for investigations or queries that may come from the public forum. And the final item in the report details the situation that exists now in respect of the Camanachd in Kingussie, which is, and it's the first time this will have been done because we have identified the pitch as being a common good asset. We need to do a consultation where there is a proposal to dispose of a common good asset. And the 2 processes, community asset transfer and common good, are not mutually exclusive. So we have to almost do the 2 processes. And it's been very much a learning process for us as to work out the best way to put those 2 together. So Kingussie's flying the flag for the first one of those that we'll have done. So I'll come on to that towards the end of the report. But the first matter that's contained in the report, members, deals with the asset register for Kingussie. You may recall that went out to consultation. As a result of that, we received some responses, a few responses back that we were able to draft, that are contained at Appendix 2, that we were able to draft our responses to those representations. Certain items that people might have thought were common good, that due to the way they've been acquired or the dates that they've been acquired, are not common good. So we've been able to prepare responses to those, which in due course will be published on the council website. So that has allowed us to prepare an asset register for Kingussie containing the information and containing the items that we believe are common good property in Kingussie. It's a living register though, and we have investigated as many items as we think are appropriate, but that doesn't mean that other things might not come out of the woodwork at some point in the future. We've done as many title documents that seem obvious to be common good. We've compared them with maps. We've looked at areas. But at some point there could easily be a title investigation that may produce something that unanticipated that turns out to be a common good asset in the future. At any point, that register can be amended and can be changed and can be added to or taken away from, depending on the circumstances. But to the best of our knowledge, the items contained in the list at Appendix 1, which is the format for the asset register, contains all of the items that we've identified as being common good in the Kingussie area. That brings me on to Granton, and we need to consider the process now for Granton, for the asset register for Granton. I've done investigations similar to the investigations that were undertaken for Kingussie and have produced a list of property that is contained at Appendix 3, I believe it is, yes, as to the list of property that's proposed to be common good. And this is the list that I would propose to go out to consultation on and see what community comments we receive back. There are some items that are not included on that list that I've already identified wouldn't be considered to be common good. Items such as the Burnfield Avenue toilets, a certain area around Forest Road, the courthouse, and things like that, but not very many. But it'll be interesting to see if we get any of those comments coming back to highlight those as being possible common good. Other than that, the items on the list, members, are the items that so far, to the best of the knowledge, we've identified as being common good. So The one thing that we would need to consider is we're now in that unusual situation with consultation, whereby COVID is changing and the restrictions are changing. And up until recently, we had extended the consultation period to take into account the difficulties associated with restrictions and members of the community taking part in consultations. But we need to decide really whether we wish to revert back to the previous consultation timescales. As far as the Act is concerned, consulting on an asset register is a 12-week public consultation period. I think we allowed 16 weeks for the Kingussie one because we were very much in the midst of COVID restrictions at the time, but obviously life is becoming more relaxed and moving more towards more normality. So you members will need to decide whether or not you wish to offer the consultation at 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 16 weeks, and then we can include that when we publish the list and launch our notifications for the consultation. And the final aspect contained in the report links with the item that Ewan was just discussing in respect of the market stance. The community asset transfer that's proposed that members you've supported going forward with, it relates to a 25-year lease of the market stance to Kingussie Camanachd Club. We took a practical decision when we considered common good assets and consultations, and there is case law that supports the view that a lease of 10 years or more classifies as a disposal, and that's the limit that we take for our leasing. So anything over 10 years is considered to be a disposal and triggers the consultation process under section 104 of the Community Empowerment Act 2015. Therefore, the 25-year lease of the market stance proposed triggers the requirement to consult. What this will effectively mean is that we will need to go out to public consultation. That public consultation period runs for a period of 8 weeks unless you decide to offer an extended period due to the current situation. And we will put in a public document together that evidences and includes the information around what the proposal is, that identifies the asset, that says that we're going forward on the basis of community asset transfer, the type of background to that and why it's being proposed that it should go forward and the nature of the proposal. And we'll invite members of the community to make comments on that. Given that the amount of work that's already taken place in respect of that, I don't foresee any major difficulties with that. I would anticipate we get positive responses back. Once we've closed the public consultation period, any responses are analysed and will come forward to yourselves, members at Area Committee, for consideration. And the governance on the decision making on the final disposal and moving forward will rest with yourselves at Area Committee due to the value of the asset against the value of the Common Good Fund. I think because we're taking the £1 value and then in due course the whole of the Common Good Fund will receive a value on property, the Camanachd pitch is going to be less than the 10% that allows the decision making to rest with the Area Committee. So as mentioned, it's quite an involved report. It's asking you to consider and look at a number of things all within one report, but it was all coming together at the same time. So it was quite right that it all was contained in this report. So I'm happy to open the floor to questions, and in however you wish to phrase the questions, if you wish to deal with one part of the report first and then progress through it, or dot around with questions, I don't mind. I'm sure I'll be able to assist.
So I've got one question. It's regarding the art and artefacts in Granton. What about the Provost chain? Because we note it in Kingussie, but not in Granton. And, yes. and I'll get questions from other members before we progress. Members, do you have any questions? Okay, just one question, Sarah. Sorry, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the detail, the extent of detail. I would prefer, I don't know what my colleagues feel, that we go back to the 12 weeks for the consultation, because there's always great sometimes excitement, but oh, when will we know? When will we know? And I think if we go back to the 12 weeks, it's sticking with what we've done originally. Thank you.
Any other questions? Personally, I would prefer we extend all the consultations by a couple of weeks, because we're only just coming out of the pandemic, and we are still in the holiday period. So I would reckon it would be quite reasonable for us to extend them both by a period of a couple of weeks. Sarah.
Certainly. To answer the question on the regalia and the robes, the chains and the robes, Granton Borough Council, their last meeting of the Borough Council that took place on the 8th of April 1975, effectively donated these to the museum. They didn't lend them, they effectively donated them, which means they passed the ownership to the museum, so that's where they are. So they're items that we were able to say would not be considered as common good. And it was very much on the basis that it wasn't too sure what would happen to them moving forward with the new council, whereas they knew they would be safely looked after, hopefully, in the museum. So on the question of the length of time of the consultation, the normal consultation period for the asset register is 12 weeks, so we could extend that to 14 weeks. That's the additional 2 weeks. The consultation on disposal, so the Camanachd pitch, the public consultation in the Act is 8 weeks, so we could have that at 10 weeks very easily. So just to give an additional 2 weeks for any additional issues that may crop up with, as mentioned, holiday period and ongoing situation with COVID. It's still a very early evolving normal situation, so it's quite reasonable to allow additional time.
So we've got two proposals, members. Any of you have any thoughts? Councillor Bruce, Councillor Hadley.
If I may, judging by the number of feral children running around all hours, I don't think parents locally are going to have anything spare to deal with consultations until they do go back to school. I think my daughter herself said parents are doing the countdown now. So I would prefer to give a couple of extra weeks just so it coincides with coming back from the holidays.
Councillor Bruce. You're on mute, John. You're still on mute. Okay.
Sorry, Bill.
Actually, John.
It did seem to be muted centrally. It wasn't me that muted it. Anyway, no, I agree with going up the extra 2 weeks.
Okay, at that then, Sarah, we'll take an extra couple of weeks on both those consultations. And thank you very much for the long list of recommendations. I'm not going to read them individually because I'm sure everyone else has. And really, this is a really great and very interesting piece of work. I thought at first it wouldn't be, but actually, when you get into the nitty-gritty of this, it's really interesting. So, Sarah, thanks very much. And members, can you agree all the recommendations? Thank you. Item 9, members, is the use of COVID ward funds. And Liz, are you going to take us through this?
Thank you, Chair. Members, you're being asked to confirm the allocation of ward COVID funds as detailed in the recommendations. This allocation supports a unique partnership approach to supporting Police Scotland in provision of additional patrols for the Glenmore area during the peak summer period. The initiative, which was proposed and is led by Inspector Vince Tuch, the Area Inspector for Badenoch and Strathspey and Nairn area, has reported as follows. And this is in response to the Chair asking for any feedback on how the patrols are going. In terms of the extra patrols, the view from the partners is essentially that the additional patrols are going very well and have been a timely addition to the visitor management pressures in the Glenmore area. We have charged 2 individuals with lighting fires in dangerous circumstances And it has also meant that we were able to provide dedicated patrols at peak times when otherwise officers on standard shifts would be pulled away to deal with other matters. The extra patrols take place on a Friday and Saturday evening until 11 p.m. and are due to end with the termination of the local school holidays. So it has been a successful initiative so far. So I would ask members if you have any questions, but this is really a confirmation of funding that was proposed and agreed in principle by members.
Members, any questions? John?
Have the funds already been given to the police, or are they still to be given?
No, the funds were agreed
Fine.
during the recess.
Yes, Councillor Bruce, this is confirmation of the funds that members lent their support to in principle. So this is following the correct governance route for the use of COVID funds. Thank you.
Councillor Hadley.
Just wondering, with the mention of to coincide with the end of the local school holidays, if there's a degree of flexibility that will just monitor the situation, just in case we don't actually see a tail off in visitors at that time.
Certainly, I can report that back to Inspector Tuch. He had assessed what he thought would be the need in working with the partners and rangers locally, but certainly I can report that back after the committee. Thank you.
Certainly seems to have taken a bit of pressure off the rangers, and also because the police are working far later in the evening. You know, having the rangers stop at 8 o'clock at night. Whilst I understand the problem, I don't think it's the perfect solution. If some of the rangers would be able to work later in the evening and start later, would probably be a better solution. But I think the police are providing the backup that's absolutely essential. It's amazing the difference that just a police officer being there makes to some of the behaviour. So members, can we agree this allocation? Thank you. Last item on the agenda, members, is the minutes. These are just for noting because they were approved by the Council on the 24th of June. So thank you very much for your time today, and thank you to everyone who attended. So enjoy the rest of your day.